Welcome to the official podcast of Vienna Shadows, a secret society uncovering Vienna's hidden mysteries. Lean back and enjoy the show.
Imagine sitting on a therapist's couch in 1920s Vienna.
Right, doing the hard work.
Yeah, exactly. You're doing the hard work. You are unpacking your deepest, darkest, repressed desires with a literal pioneer of psychoanalysis.
Sounds intense already.
It is. But
Yeah.
what if your therapist isn't just like listening to your trauma? What if they are actually using those secrets as a literal psychic tether to summon some ancient tentacled god from the void?
That is quite the pivot.
Right. Well, welcome to the deep dive. Today, our mission is to unpack a stack of tabletop RPG sources for a game called Vienna Shadows.
Specifically, we're zeroing in on a genuinely wild supplement, the Gender, Sexuality, and Art Guide.
Yes, exactly. We are going to explore how the game designers basically take these, factual, historical, social movements and turn them into terrifying mathematical game mechanics that a game master can use.
I mean, it is an incredibly ambitious piece of world building, honestly.
For sure.
What's really fascinating here is how they didn't just paste like Lovecraftian monsters into a historical era. They looked at the actual history of Vienna between the World Wars.
The sexual revolution, the explosive new art movements, all that stuff.
Exactly. And they wove those social dynamics directly into the cosmology of the horror itself.
Okay, so let's unpack this for you listening, because the way this game operates is just brilliant.
Yeah, it really is.
To figure out how a game master pulls off this kind of intricate campaign at the table, we're going to give you a clear roadmap.
Right, so first we'll look under the hood at the core rules engine.
Then we'll explore the volatile historical streets the game drives through, those world-building elements.
And finally, we'll walk through a sample campaign arc to see how it actually plays out in a game.
Perfect. So let's start with the skeleton, right? The core rules.
Yeah, the foundational rules for Vienna Shadows. Looking at the translated source text, they're designed to be like almost aggressively compact.
Okay, how compact are we talking?
Well, you use a digital or physical character sheet, and the whole system revolves around literally just 4 core attributes.
Just 4?
Yeah. Intellect, charisma, perception, and strength. That is it.
Really? Because I'm used to tabletop games with these massive, complex dice pools where you're, calculating a half dozen modifiers every time you swing a sword.
Oh, totally. But here, the core mechanic is just a single D6.
Like a standard 6-sided Monopoly die.
Exactly. It uses a roll-under system.
Yeah.
So if you face a challenge, you want to roll a number that is lower than your attribute score.
Oh, okay. So it's like golf. You actually want the low score. The lower you roll, the better you perform.
Right. Exactly like golf. And the game master can apply modifiers, making the target number higher or lower depending on events or items or spells.
But the stakes are still super high, right?
Oh, incredibly high. They remain strictly binary. If your health stat hits 0, you die. If your sanity, like your mind, hits 0, you go permanently insane.
I'm looking at these modifiers in the source, and I have to admit I'm a bit confused.
How so?
Well, if the cosmic stakes are so high and you are fighting literal gods, why keep the math so simple? Doesn't relying on a single D6 make the horror feel a bit, flat?
It might seem that way at first glance, but if we connect this to the broader psychology of horror gaming, minimal math is exactly what keeps the tension alive.
Oh, because it's faster.
Yeah, think about it from the player's perspective. When your character is being chased down a dark alleyway by some cosmic entity and you only have 1 health point left.
You don't want to pause the narrative to do complex algebra.
Precisely. You want quick, brutal resolutions. The mechanics are basically supposed to get out of the way of the dread.
That makes total sense.
The GM says, the creature lunges, roll under your strength, you toss 1 die, and you instantly know if you survive or die. It keeps that visceral panic front and center.
I love that. The immediacy of that one roll creates a massive spike of adrenaline.
Absolutely.
But a simple D6 system is just a skeleton. And a skeleton isn't really scary until you drape it in something recognizable.
Right. You need the flesh.
Exactly. And that brings us to the actual setting, this really messy, wild cultural landscape of 1920s Vienna.
And this is where the Vienna Shadows Guide really distinguishes itself. It paints this incredibly vivid picture of what historically was known as Red Vienna.
Yeah, the sources describe it as a city of radical contradictions.
It really was.
You have these conservative hinterlands just outside the city clinging tightly to traditional patriarchal norms. But inside the city, there's this vibrant queer vanguard.
Right, and a massive wave of new feminism, women entering the workforce.
Hidden trans and cross-dressing clubs, too, like the historical cafe Fluttermouse, all becoming hubs of underground expression. We're just reporting what the sources highlight here, but it's a huge shift.
It is. The game establishes these factual historical elements as the foundational layer of its setting, but then it introduces what the designers call the shadow twist.
And here's where it gets really interesting for the GM.
Yeah, because in this universe, breaking traditional social taboos isn't just a political movement.
It's literal magic.
Yeah,
right?
basically, yeah. It is quite literally tearing away the cultural veil that keeps the cosmic horrors of the void at bay.
Oh, wow.
The hidden cults in the game view all this gender fluidity and the breaking of traditional roles as a dismantling of the rigid geometries imposed by the old gods.
So to the cults, human society and conservative norms are like a magical containment grid.
Exactly.
And as society naturally evolves and liberates itself, the cults see a crack in the armor that they can exploit to let the monsters in. That is such a fascinating dilemma to throw at players.
It really is, because the social progress is necessary and good for the characters, but the cults are weaponizing that very same breakdown of form.
But the sources also mention a much darker economic reality of the time, right?
Yeah, the hyperinflation.
Right, the hyperinflation that forced thousands of people into sex work just to survive. The guide references this through the scandalous novel Josephine Mutzenbacher.
Which was a very real historical text, yeah.
So if the cults are exploiting shifting social norms, how do they exploit this desperate economic underground?
It's a grim piece of the world building, but essential. The game turns places like the infamous Salon Spitalberg brothel into neutral zones for the occult.
Wow, okay.
Because poverty makes flesh cheap, the sex trade becomes intertwined with occult trafficking. The cultists use these underground networks to harvest raw psychic energy.
The energy generated by, like, extreme pleasure and pain.
Exactly. Pleasure, pain, degradation. They harvest it all.
That is just a terrifying way to merge history and horror. And it doesn't stop with the social underground. It actually bleeds right up into high culture, too.
Oh, absolutely. The art and psychology of 1920s Vienna are literally weaponized in the mechanics.
Let's talk about the Art Nouveau movement, Jugendstil. You've got Gustav Klimt and Egon Schiele dominating the galleries.
Right, but the game master is instructed to apply that shadow twist to the canvas itself.
So Klimt is famous for his golden phase, using actual gold leaf. But in Vienna Shadows, the guide reveals that gold leaf is actually an esoteric alloy designed to trap cosmic entities.
Which is such a brilliant detail.
And Egon Schiele, he painted these twisted, emaciated nudes. In the game, he isn't just expressing psychological alienation. He is literally depicting human bodies warping under the gravitational pull of the void.
It completely changes how players interact with the environment. An art gallery isn't just scenery, it's an active hazard.
That is so cool. And then you have Sigmund Freud.
Right, mapping the human unconscious at Burgess 19.
This might be my favorite detail in the entire stack of sources.
It's so good. The cults know a truth that Freud hasn't quite grasped yet. The id, our primal drive, isn't just a concept.
It's an alien entity.
Yes, it is the literal threshold where the fragile human mind touches the dream space of cosmic horrors.
Horrors like Cthulhu and Yog-Sothoth. So our repressed desires are literal psychic tethers for these gods to pull on.
Exactly.
But how does a game master make Freud scary using a single D6, like mechanically?
The guide gives specific environmental rules for that, like the seduction of the ed mechanic.
Okay, how does that work?
Imagine your character is trying to resist cult mind control. The GM asks you to roll under your intellect. But if your character is actively repressing a dark secret or trauma, the difficulty goes up by +1.
So Freudian repression is basically a psychic pressure cooker in this game.
That's a great way to put it.
The harder you try to push down a secret to act normal, the more steam builds up, making it mathematically easier for an entity to blow the lid off your sanity.
Your own secrets make you mechanically vulnerable. It's brilliant.
I love that. And there's also the streets currency mechanic, right?
Yeah, for navigating the vice rings.
If you want to blend into a brothel to find clues, you roll your intellect combined with charisma. If you succeed, you blend in. If you fail, you draw the attention of corrupt cops or cult scouts.
Right, it makes social stealth just as dangerous as combat.
But my absolute favorite mechanic has to be jazz punk resonance.
Oh, it is the definitive soundtrack of this universe.
So you have this loud, distorted, syncopated jazz in these subterranean cellars. Mechanically, the chaotic rhythms act as a literal sonic barrier against the outer gods.
Which means if you're in a club playing jazz punk, you get a -1 modifier to your strength rolls against cosmic horror.
And lower is better, so the music actually makes you mathematically stronger against the monsters.
Yes, but there is a trade-off. Because it's so loud, the GM increases the difficulty of your perception checks by +1.
Ah, so you're safer from cosmic dread, but effectively deaf to physical dangers around you, like an assassin sneaking up.
Exactly. It's a fantastic dilemma for players.
So a game master has to juggle all these volatile elements, the art, the psychology, the clubs. How do they structure it so players aren't just completely overwhelmed?
Well, that brings us directly to the third part of our exploration, the sample campaign arc.
Right, it's called the Unbound Muse.
And it serves as a masterclass in putting all these toys into the sandbox with a clear, driving narrative.
Let's set the board first. The guide sets up this antagonist dynamic called the War of the Robes, with 4 factions manipulating the city.
First are the Black Robes. Their whole philosophy is that chaos equals liberation. They want to dissolve reality entirely to let the old ones in.
Then the Golden Robes, who are the exact opposite. They want to strictly regulate sexuality and art to preserve their own power, but secretly harvest that repressed psychic energy.
Right. Then the Crimson Robes, who actually split in 2. The main Crimson Robes view all this shifting social dynamic as historical data.
Yeah, they want to summon a cosmic entity into a boundaryless form just to archive its memory, which is insanely reckless.
It absolutely is. And that's why the 4th faction, the Crimson Cracked Branch, exists. They actively oppose the summoning.
They work on the ground with feminist activists and queer mutual aid networks to protect vulnerable street workers from being sacrificed.
Exactly. So imagine you're at the table. Act 1, the canvas of Twisted Flesh.
The GM delivers the hook.
Your group is hired by a Cracked Branch activist. The mission is to find several gender nonconforming artists and sex workers who vanished from the Spitalberg district.
And the only clue the GM gives you is these anonymous, highly scandalous paintings appearing in back alley galleries.
Paintings that stylistically look exactly like Egon Schiele's work.
This is where the GM asks for that first roll. If you make a successful intellect check, you notice the paint shimmers under the gaslight.
Because the pigments are mixed with a psychic bodily fluid.
Ugh, so unsettling. And the subjects in the paintings are the missing people, but their anatomy has been impossibly rearranged into these horrific geometries.
It's a visceral start that perfectly ties the art history to the cosmic threat.
So you follow the trail, which brings us to Act 2. Syncopated sanctuaries, the escalation.
The clues lead your party down into an underground jazz punk club called Der Nachtfalk.
This is where the factions collide. The GM reveals a golden robe psychoanalyst secretly funds the club.
Right, he uses the chaotic jazz punk music to deliberately lower the psychological defenses of the crowd.
Peeling back their mental armor while they dance?
Yes. And then black robe infiltrators sweep in and harness their subconscious dreams.
Which is what happened to the missing workers. Their minds were hollowed out right there.
But the GM doesn't let you just watch. An action sequence erupts.
Right, the doors burst open. A corrupt vice squad raids the club to arrest the trans lead singer. The music stops. The crowd panics.
And here the GM forces a hard choice. Do you use perception to navigate the stampede and slip out unseen?
Or do you rely on strength to physically fight off the cops so the singer can escape? You're fighting corrupt institutions as much as monsters.
Exactly. And however you handle it, the clues point you toward the grand finale. Act 3. The Metamorphosis of Mutzenbacher.
The climax. The GM sets the scene at an abandoned, opulent bathhouse near the Danube.
The air is thick with steam and ozone. The main Crimson Robes have taken the hollowed-out victims there.
And in the center of the pool, they've erected this massive, gilded frame carved with corrupt Art Nouveau patterns. They're using it as a literal portal.
Right. They are trying to summon an aspect of Shub-Niggurath.
For anyone unfamiliar, that's an ancient deity of twisted fertility and chaotic creation.
The cultists call this aspect the Unbound Flesh, a genderless, multi-limbed deity of pure potentiality.
The imagery is so cinematic. The main Crimson Robes chanting a cosmic version of Josephine Mutzenbacher, while the Black Robes try to force the victims through the frame.
They believe shattering all human boundaries will pull the entity into our world.
So how do you stop a ritual that is psychological, artistic, and cosmic all at once.
The mechanics here are fantastic. First, just to stand in the room, you have to roll sanity with a massive +3 penalty because of the entity's maddening aura.
That is incredibly difficult to survive.
It is. But if you keep your mind intact, you have two options.
You can use brute force, right? Roll strength to physically smash the gilded Art Nouveau frame and sever the portal.
Or you can use intellect. Plug into the club's smuggled amplifiers and play a wildly disruptive jazz punk melody to break the psychic tether.
I just love that you can literally fight an outer god with a brass section. It's so cool.
It perfectly reflects the themes of the campaign.
So what does this mean for the end? The epilogue gives clear states for success and failure.
If you succeed, the portal shuts, the workers are saved by the cracked branch.
You earn banned literature for future adventures and a safe haven in the jazz punk network.
But if you fail those final rolls, the entity partially manifests.
The GM tells you the entire Spitalberg district is turned into a quarantine zone of shifting organic architecture.
Where the human form becomes fluid and unbound from reality. A permanent, terrifying consequence.
It really highlights how perfectly this guide merges its themes.
It really does.
So, to summarize our journey for you today, we've seen how a GM takes a simple D6 system, layers it with radical art, psychoanalysis, and the social upheaval of 1920s Vienna.
Creating a setting where fighting cosmic horror is inextricably linked to cultural rebellion and identity.
Exactly. It's so much more than just shooting monsters.
It asks players to consider how society's rules protect us, but also how those rules can be prisons that the darkness exploits.
Beautifully said.
Which actually leaves me with a thought I can't quite shake based on the lore we've discussed today.
Laid on me.
Well, we talked about how Freud's concept of the id is an alien doorway, right?
Right.
And our repressed desires are the literal psychic tethers the outer gods use to pull us into the void.
Yeah, that was wild.
So it makes you wonder, if a character were to successfully complete psychoanalysis and somehow remove all of their psychological repressions,
Okay.
does that make them completely immune to cosmic horror because the tethers are gone? Or does it simply clear the doorway entirely, leaving your mind wide open for something much, much worse to step right in?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That is going to keep me up tonight. By tearing down our walls, are we freeing ourselves, or are we just rolling out the welcome mat for the void?
It's a terrifying question.
That is an incredible note to end on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. And whatever you do, keep exploring the shadows.
This concludes today's episode. Don't forget to rate and subscribe. Until next time, Vienna Shadows, signing off.